FDA warning on imported cookware. Regulation exists, enforcement fails. Sep 18th. Reference: U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA. FDA issues warning about imported cookware that may leach lead. August 2025, FDA.gov. Executive Summary. In August 2025, the FDA issued a safety alert identifying imported aluminum and brass cookware that leaches unsafe levels of lead when used to cook or store food. Contrary to initial public perceptions, this is not a case of regulatory absence. U.S. law explicitly prohibits lead in food contact surfaces. The crisis emerges from two structural failures. Contaminated cookware successfully entered the U.S. retail chain. In at least one case, Tiger White Aluminium Kadai Karahi, the FDA was unable to identify the responsible importer, preventing a mandatory recall. This incident highlights the fragility of global trade enforcement. Strict regulation is meaningless if supply chains and import registries fail to provide traceability. Key findings: identified products: Tiger White Aluminium Kadai Karahi, India; Silver Horse Aluminium Mah Kadai 26, Silver Horse Aluminium Milk Pan 4, JK Valabdas Aluminium Kadai India Bazaar No. 3. Confirmed hazard: lead leaching into food, posing cumulative neurological and developmental risks, especially to children and pregnant lactating women. Structural failure: FDA unable to trace the importer of Tiger White cookware, leaving contaminated units in circulation without a formal recall. Legal status: all such cookware is considered adulterated under U.S. law. Presence of lead in food contact materials is prohibited. BBIU analysis: the FDA case illustrates a paradox of global regulatory systems. Law without traceability is powerless. Not a regulatory vacuum. The U.S. framework is clear: no lead in food contact products. Failure lies in enforcement. Ports, customs, and distributor records allowed contaminated goods into circulation without a fully accountable importer. Systemic vulnerability: low-cost, high-volume imports from markets with weaker metallurgical oversight can bypass U.S. consumer safety safeguards if import responsibility cannot be legally assigned. Symbolic dimension: consumers assume FDA-regulated equals safe. The fact that products can circulate with confirmed lead contamination undermines public trust in regulatory authority and exposes the hidden weakness of fragmented global supply chains. BBIU editorial opinion: lead poisoning in the modern era, the silent risk behind FDA's warning. What is lead poisoning? Saturnism. Lead poisoning, historically called Saturnism, is a toxic, multisystemic condition caused by the accumulation of lead in the human body. Unlike acute infections or injuries, Saturnism is insidious and cumulative. The body cannot efficiently eliminate lead, which deposits in blood, soft tissues, and bones, and is released slowly over years. How is it contracted today? In the industrial era, lead exposure came from paint, gasoline, or factory emissions. In the 21st century, bans on leaded gasoline and regulation of paints largely reduced cases in developed countries. Yet exposure persists through imported consumer products: cookware, ceramics, cosmetics, toys, jewelry; water systems, old pipes or solder joints; occupational exposure, mining, smelting, battery recycling, construction; food contact items, as highlighted by the FDA, low-cost cookware made from contaminated aluminum or brass alloys. Saturnism in the modern era is not gone. It has simply shifted from local industry to globalized trade of poorly regulated imports. Epidemiological and social dimension: lead exposure is not a relic of the past. It remains a current public health burden. United States: according to NHANES data, blood lead levels have declined over the past 40 years since the phase-out of leaded gasoline and lead paint. Yet it is estimated that over 500,000 U.S. children still have blood lead levels above the CDC reference value, with disproportionate impact on African American and low-income households living in older housing stock. Persistence in vulnerable communities: substandard housing with legacy lead paint, water systems with lead solder, and now imported cookware or cosmetics create layered risks for populations with the least access to medical care. Globalized risk transfer: while advanced economies banned lead in paint and gasoline decades ago, the problem resurfaces through international trade of poorly regulated products: cookware, toys, cosmetics, manufactured in jurisdictions with weaker enforcement. This creates a paradox. The U.S. eliminated domestic industrial sources, only to re-import the hazard embedded in consumer goods. Invisible inequity: lead poisoning is not evenly distributed. It thrives where infrastructure is old, regulation is weakly enforced, and consumers rely on low-cost imports. It is as much a marker of socioeconomic inequality as it is of toxicology. Early symptoms, the invisible phase. Lead poisoning rarely begins with dramatic signs. Initial symptoms are nonspecific: fatigue, irritability, sleep problems, headaches, abdominal discomfort, constipation, subtle cognitive decline in children such as attention deficit and learning difficulties. Because these complaints mimic common conditions, lead poisoning often goes unnoticed until anemia or neurological issues appear. How is it diagnosed? Laboratory, blood lead level, BLL, is the gold standard. Any detectable level in children is unsafe. Hematology, anemia is microcytic and hypochromic, often mistaken for iron deficiency. A classic marker is basophilic stippling in red blood cells, visible on peripheral smear when specifically sought. Clinical suspicion is crucial. Without the physician considering lead exposure, the diagnosis is often missed. Treatment options. Remove the source. Stop exposure by discarding contaminated products or changing environment. Chelation therapy, for moderate to severe cases. Drugs such as EDTA, DMSA succimer, or BL bind lead and facilitate excretion. Supportive care, treat anemia, hypertension, renal impairment, or neurological sequelae. No safe level, even low exposure, requires vigilance, especially in children. Who are the most vulnerable? Children. Developing brains are highly sensitive to lead, causing irreversible cognitive and behavioral deficits. Pregnant women. Lead crosses the placenta, affecting fetal neurodevelopment. Breastfeeding mothers. Bone stores of lead can release into breast milk. Workers in recycling, metallurgy, or construction. Low-income populations, more exposed to low-cost imports and substandard housing. BBIU perspective. The FDA's warning on imported cookware is not a footnote in consumer safety. It is a reminder of how Saturnism persists in modern disguise. The pathology is ancient, but the vector is modern globalization. Unsafe alloys crossing borders under the radar. Symptoms are silent. Diagnosis depends on suspicion, and treatment is costly and complex. The vulnerable groups, children, pregnant women, low-income households, are precisely those least able to detect or protect themselves. Saturnism today is no longer the disease of miners and factory workers. It is a structural failure of trade traceability. A pot on a supermarket shelf can carry the same toxic legacy as a century-old lead pipe.
Welcome to the BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit, where symbolic integrity meets strategic clarity. At BBIU, we go beyond the headlines to decode the structural forces behind global biopharma, AI, and economic realignment. If you value precision, verification, and symbolic depth, this channel is for you. Subscribe now to access our weekly briefings, dossiers, and intelligence reports, and consider joining our institutional tier to unlock early warning systems, custom metrics, and exclusive strategic insight. You're not just listening, you're entering the future of epistemic intelligence. www.biopharmabusinessintelligenceunit.com